Welcome to Machine Minds, where technology and humanity meet. I'm your host, Greg Terrusian, founder of Samson Rose, a recruiting and search business focused on the robotics and AI industries. The Machine Minds show is where we dive deep into the intricate world of robotics and artificial intelligence. As a staffing industry leader with a passion for the frontiers of technology, I'm pleased to be bringing you intimate conversations with the founders, investors, and trailblazers who are at the heart of the AI and robotics revolution. In each episode, we dig into their journeys, the applications of the products they're working on, and the breakthroughs that are shaping our future. Join us as we explore how these machine minds are transforming the way we live, work, and understand our world. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a tech enthusiast, or just curious about this amazing field, you'll learn something new with each episode. Let's delve into the extraordinary. Let's delve into machine minds. Hello and welcome to Machine Minds. I'm your host, Greg Terrusian, founder of Samson Rose, your robotics talent search partner. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Arshan Poursohi, co-founder and CEO of Third Wave Automation. Thanks for being on the show today, Arshan.
Thanks for having me. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, let's jump into it. So look, I love to start with our guest's background, and yours is super impressive. You've had a great career path leading up to founding Third Wave Automation. So just to set the stage, can you give the listeners a brief overview of your career prior to founding this company?
Yeah, of course. And thank you. So I've been in commercial R&D for my whole career, pretty much. I started off as an intern at Sun Microsystems, which was a fantastic place to start. I was part of the R&D labs there called Sun Labs. Which was pretty amazing for me. I went from university at UC Berkeley to working with the people that had written the books that I was studying from. So it was pretty amazing, just right off the cuff there. And I've always I went from there to Google, to Toyota Research, and then finally finding my own company. And the entire time through my whole career, I've been working on the edge of hardware and software. When I started at Sun, it was part of the ASIC team, but writing compilers and parsers and so on to work with the hardware. And I just sort of kept that trend going right into robotics.
That's really cool. That is really cool. And what were some of like the key takeaways from working at companies like Google, TRI, and Sun Microsystems? How do you think those roles and the work that you did kind of prepared you for founding your own company?
Firstly, it was just the tech. All three of those places were very, very tech forward. Sun and Google, of course, are renowned for it. And Toyota, in particular, Toyota Research, I was part of the very beginnings of the company being founded in the States. And it was an amazing opportunity to work on technology to solve problems. And so it's always define the problem and then define the solution for it, as opposed to building a hammer and then trying to find a nail.
Yeah. It's very smart. That's actually great advice for any aspiring founders out there. Like, take note, please. So let's shift gears to talk about Third Wave. Can you explain what the company does, just for the audience, so we're all on the same page?
Of course, we build autonomous forklifts, and in particular, we build the software for autonomous forklifts, because it turns out forklifts are really, really well sorted. It's been 100 years, and pallets and forklifts all have been there the whole time.
Awesome. So the software, are you integrating it into existing hardware, or do you also build the hardware?
That's right. Yeah. So we, on top of forklifts that are already driven by the wire, so a CAN bus enabled forklift, and then we attach our compute and sensors to it.
Perfect. And let's talk about your founding story. So what actually inspired you to start this company, and what was the initial vision behind it?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. That's the other side of having worked at these big companies, on robotics projects in particular, because none of those places was robotics the key driving function there. And so I worked on a lot of robotics that I'm very proud of all the projects I worked on, all the teams I worked with, but they didn't ship. They were internal projects, some of them used fairly extensively internally, but never out into the real world doing the dull, dirty, dangerous jobs that we all know robots are good at. And so the drive ultimately was that I saw this opportunity with forklifts, these machines that desperately needed to be automated. It seemed really obvious to me that the next step in that evolution was to automate. They didn't need a revolution. It was just do the next thing. And so the opportunity to take what I had been doing, me and my co-founders all take the work we had been doing and make it very, very useful to real people in the real world. was a little bit too good to pass up.
That's awesome. And how did you become aware of that problem? Is it one of your founders, were they from the space, and then you're like, okay.
Yeah. So we had been having that discussion that I just outlined, like how to go from and this is actually an interesting side note. You call things robots for as long as they're not useful. As soon as they're useful, you immediately call them whatever it is they're doing, usually, but something else. And so we had been having that discussion, over beers and over coffee for a long time. And then it turns out Toyota, in addition to everything else they do, builds about a third of the world's forklifts. And so having
really,
which is double the next company down. So the vast majority of the forklifts. And so I got access to the teams that were doing the design and build of those trucks, of the steel, actually bending the steel, putting it together. And so as a result of the opportunity of working at TRI, I had exposure there. And then actually Toyota Ventures ended up being one of my investors. So I built a lot of connections there that were important.
That's great. Yeah. And being a known entity to them, I'm sure that really helped.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Exactly.
Obviously, starting a company, especially a technical startup, it's never easy. What were some of the challenges that you faced early on?
So one is the other, more about working at these big companies. There was often more budget than you knew what to do with. Making $1 million mistake was not the end of the world. And so you had to be very careful about not making mistakes or rolling with the punches a little bit faster, is maybe another way to frame it. That you have to turn what might be a mistake quickly into not a mistake because you don't have the funds to go back and redo the thing. And so some of that, there were some technical hurdles. So it's a well-constrained environment. And we did well, but there's still a long tail, just like a lot of robotics. You always have to be careful of what the real world brings.
Yeah, very interesting. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. It's always one of the main things. I'm obviously from the hiring world, so whenever I'm talking to people, especially to come in and lead departments, it's like, well, how I know you want the idea of a startup sounds fun and it's a shiny thing, but how are you going to work with less resources, less budget, smaller team? I think that's a real challenge. Some people don't really think through properly before they dive headfirst into the startup world.
Though, I got to say, just to make sure people don't get scared off, constraints have a beautiful effect of focusing everything. So adding constraints to the system, in this case, budget constraints, has a great way of making you solve the problem really, really effectively. And I've always thought that even back when I worked at Google, where constraints weren't quite the same.
It's so true. And again, from the hiring lens, looking at it, and we think about since COVID, and then like we went through the wave of furloughs, layoffs, then hiring back again, and then again, the downsizing. But people were always trying to do more with less, or at least the same with less. And it made you think about how can we be a lot more intentional about the hires that we're making, the work that we're doing, the projects that we're focused on, what we're spending on tools and systems and things like that. But people, I was guilty of it as well. You just overcomplicate your own stack because you're like, oh, it's fine. What's X amount more a month or a year? Like, let's just throw it in. If it works great. But then, like you said, you put constraints in there. It makes you more efficient, makes you more intentional. And then simplifying it all round is a better thing, in my opinion. So in the space, I'm not sure if you've got many competitors, but how does your technology differentiate from other solutions in the market or other people doing similar things?
So I can answer that at two different levels. The one I find more interesting as a technologist, we have built our system on this idea called shared autonomy, that we call shared autonomy. Another term of art for it is human-in-the-loop machine learning. Or learning from human feedback. Reinforcement learning from human feedback is the more recent buzzword around it. And it's basic. Exactly. And so the basic premise of it is don't try and build the robot so that it knows how to solve every problem it might run into. Or promise our customers a lights out warehouse would be another way to look at it. But instead, just know that there is a long tail out there. Build the robot and the machine learning and the stack to recognize either when it's going to do something that might be unsafe or that it just has low confidence in what the next action is. And it turns out there's a little bit more to it that maybe we can get into. But basically, do that. Assume that we're selling our customers a fleet of forklifts that needs a person backing it. And that's what we do. We call them fleet operators. And we take the person who was driving the forklift manually and sit them behind a computer instead, in the same building, looking at all the same payloads and everything. And then that way, whenever there is a question about this, we get a signal, we get an answer, and that becomes our data set for doing another round of training and making all of the systems even better.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad that you touched on that, because one of the things that we keep talking about is the ethical concerns, and people always pushing back on like, oh, you know, robots take people's jobs. And I'm always like, they're going to create more jobs. People become robot operators. You upskill them in other areas. And this is a perfect example of that.
Yeah. And actually, this wasn't, I did approach, and this is a good bit of advice, you shouldn't approach startups mostly from the technical side or entirely from the technical side, mixing in some of the other aspects. But a really nice surprise that we ran into as we had those very early conversations with prospective customers was exactly that we would go in, and they had talked to other potential competitors of ours who told them, listen, you can fire everybody. We're just going to put in 20 robots and it'll solve your whole problem. One, they don't believe it. So us going in and saying, hey, listen, robots aren't going to solve the whole problem, but we are building it knowing that was one good aspect. And then the other really good aspect was being able to say that the folks that you love that are on your staff now aren't going anywhere. You can have them drive fleets of forklifts now, so you can bring on the customers that you've been saying no to. And this was important around the COVID time, especially. And then also that they know this is the interesting side effect. So the thing I described was, you know, either technically it was not confident of what to do next, or we identified a situation as unsafe. What also happens in practice is a lot of administrative failures. So pallets being where they're not supposed to be, or the barcode on a pallet not being the one it's supposed to be. And you can't, there was no way the robot would have context to do that, whereas a person could look at it and say, oh, well, yeah, no, that came in yesterday. We're not expecting it, but it goes with this bunch of things. And so having the system built around that has these really nice side effects that it's been fun to see.
That's really cool. It's great to hear the real world side of it. And I'm sure for our listeners as well, because we always talk about how we can prepare to, or how we can think about that adoption and what that means for the workforce, or even the environment that, or in this case, you know, warehouse, wherever it is that the technology is being adopted in. And this is great. This is awesome. Thank you for that. So in terms of like, I was actually going to ask about success stories, but honestly, that does sound like one to me straight off the bat. And I think as well from a customer, this is just my 2 cents, but from a customer standpoint, the awareness and humility and education that you give when you pitch your product about like, well, look, it's not going to solve everything. This isn't like the perfect solution that you can fire everyone in, and you can retain your staff and give them like a better quality of life and better quality of employment, which especially in environments like that helps with retention, you know, because it's like very high turnover. I think is a great pitch.
Yeah, agreed. And it really, starting the conversation that way leads to a level of trust. And this was another lesson in building a company. Forming that trust and a real relationship with your prospective and then actual customers is huge. And the flip of it is also important, that you trust them, that you can have a conversation with them easily, whether it's going really well or if it's not going well. Both sides of that makes it easier.
Right. And I'm sure that trust and that open line of communication helps you in the long run with your product, right? Because they're going to be more willing to either test new features or give you honest feedback, or when you come in there, like if they do have an issue, you can come in and work with them collaboratively to solve it, instead of them just being like, doesn't work, remove it or stick it in the corner. I don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's huge. And then also very concretely, and as you go through raising funds, being able to call out to the customers and get the folks that come in and interview them can sense the fake, like if it's not real, if it's a fake stamp of approval, that's really pretty easy to read. The real stamps of approval always come with like, well, it did this, and then here there's, you know, opportunity to improve, you can call it. Right. If you don't hear that last part, you don't believe the rest of it.
So true. Yeah. Let's talk about, because obviously from the technical side, innovation is probably super important for you guys, and always thinking about like next stage, next feature, next iteration, etc. But how do you balance innovation with practical business considerations, right? Because you obviously revenue
Yeah.
has got,
I'll draw a tighter line. You have to, even if, and I mentioned my career has been largely in R&D facilities. Even in innovation, if you don't draw the line in the right place, you're not going to get a lot done. That's even more true when you're trying to build something for a real world customer that needs to just use the thing. Adding more features doesn't solve all problems, or innovating one more thing doesn't solve the real problem. So it's really about staying focused on the thing you're trying to solve, and then you get surprised. It's been my experience. Often you get surprised by the other effects when you make a really good solution for a particular problem you're focusing on. It turns out it applies to a lot of things. Whereas if you go around trying to build a bunch of features, you often don't solve anyone's actual problem.
Yeah, interesting. That's really good. Yeah. As an entrepreneur and leader, what has been your guiding philosophy in building and leading this company?
It's all about the team. The people working here make all the difference, and small things that happen along the way that I don't even know about are as a result of the quality of folks that work here. And so keeping that bar very high is very important.
Yeah. Something very close to my heart, obviously. And yeah, I obviously believe that recruiting, and then not only just recruiting, but retaining strong team members is crucial in any industry, but to the success of any business. How do you approach building your team, and how do you think about putting the key people in those roles?
Yeah. I guess I've had the good. So my having gone through the career I went through before I started a company, I had a lot of people in my network that I already had a lot of respect for. I'd already gone through a lot of projects, and I got to say, between you and me and everyone listening, the thing I'm proudest of here is how many of the people from my own past, from my own history, are wanted to come work with me and for me.
Love that.
It's a huge point of pride for me. But it's hard to get that out of an interview. And so you want to get, if you can find people in your network that have worked with the person that you're, I take that signal very, very seriously. And then don't be scared of long interviews or of asking hard questions during an interview. You don't have to be the nicest person in the room during the interview process.
That's great. Yeah. Especially if it's your project, your company, you want to be more thorough. Like, don't rush to make a decision. I will play devil's advocate, though, from the recruiting side, that dragging a process on too long can be detrimental and a bad candidate experience. So you need to balance that finely, at least if it's different stuff, and keeping the person engaged and keeping them aware of why and what you're doing.
Yeah. And that comes to preparation. This is one thing that I learned the hard way, I think, here. I had, at the places I was before, there were huge recruiting arms that already did a whole bunch of work before I ever spoke to a person. And here, that preparation had to be done by us working with recruiters. But the more preparation you do, the preparation before you start the interview process, know exactly what you're looking for, and go from there.
Yeah, that intake and alignment process, and getting clear on what the profile, the persona looks like, matching that to the role and the need and what success looks like in the role is key. If you don't do that ahead of time, you're kind of like spinning your wheels throughout the process and can just carry on for months. What qualities do you look for in potential hires?
That, I guess, and this is not as concrete an answer as my other ones, but that during the interview, I found the people that are really good, I find new information during the interview. I find they know more about the thing they're doing than I do. And this is as CEO, when I was hiring engineering folks, this is less true, I think. But when you're looking at the higher level roles, more senior roles in the company, they should know more than you. They should be better at what they do than you do. And so as you're going through the interview process, I find that out. The people that seem the best, that have done the best once we hired them, are people that I learned from during the interview process. I find out something at the end of the interview that I didn't know going in.
Amazing. Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself, especially in those key leadership roles. Something that I always tell founders when I'm working with them, I'm like, look, we can craft a profile and look at what job description will look like or what you want the role to be. But really, the best person that you hire is actually going to come in and be part of that crafting of the position as well. Like, you need to leave a little bit of wiggle room, because maybe you've never had a COO before, and you don't know what that role can really encompass and what else this person can take under them. Or if you have a head of sales, like, or revenue, or whatever it is, they can help craft their comp plan as well, and for their team underneath them. You don't need to have all those things answered, but you need to know what your goal is for that role, and then give some wiggle room for someone at that level to actually make it their own as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's key. Following on from that, then, in your opinion, how do you think having the wrong people or someone that's not strong enough in a role, how do you think that can affect your business? Whether that's like your team dynamic, retention, business goals, milestones, whatever.
Yeah. It's an old adage. It's a cliche, so sorry to use it, but a bad apple causes a lot of problems. And this was another lesson I learned here. By the time you, as a CEO, as a founder, as whatever, recognize things like that, what it often means is that the people that are directly working with the person have recognized it already for weeks or months. And so there is no acting too fast once you see the situation happening. That's a lesson that I'm probably still learning.
It's true. Yeah. It's that hire slow, fire fast. It sounds like you're trying to follow that.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously you've gone through this stage, and for the audience who don't know, what stage are you at as a company right now? How big are you?
We're actually just closing our C stage. We're about 60 people. Amazing.
Okay. And is there any advice that you would give for aspiring entrepreneurs that want to be in this sector?
Well, one, it's a really good time to be. It was rough for the last 2 years or so, but things are rebounding. In particular around robotics, it seems pretty obvious if you Google robotics nowadays. The technology is coming to a point around it where it's a really fantastic time to find a problem that you see the value in solving, that you can prove there's customers for, and then get to work solving it.
Perfect. When you look at the industry as a whole, and there's obviously so much happening right now, technical innovations and new products and things like that, and obviously powered by AI. What excites you most about the future of robotics and AI right now? And are there any like emerging trends or technologies that you're particularly enthusiastic about?
Yeah, a lot, and we benefit from this quite a bit. There's been a lot of investment around the autonomous car space. And there's a whole bunch of action now moving into more constrained, moving that same tech, basically the same sensor development has been great, the compute, GPUs, and then of course all the software behind the reinforcement learning and other sorts of nets. It solves real problems. And if you take away all of the long tail that's out on the streets, on city streets and country streets and all the other places, you can solve them really, really effectively. So a warehouse is a good example of this. It constrains it enough where the existing stuff can run very safely, very efficiently, and you can build and launch a product in startup timeframes.
So cool. Yeah, it's exciting. Very exciting time to be involved in this.
Yeah.
How do you see third wave automation evolving over the next sort of 5-10 years?
It's actually we've made our bed really well. Is the way the technology's all there. It's all about expanding into bigger fleets of forklifts and finding what things are unknown unknowns in that context. What happens when you're running 40 trucks in a building, then 100 trucks in a building, and then I guess over that long of a time frame, we start looking maybe outdoor. So right now we're strictly indoor electric forklifts and so on, and there's plenty of space to expand from there into neighboring markets.
Lovely. I guess not really off topic, but what's your viewpoint on having like external or international reliance right now? Because obviously you're a US company. What do you think about like a reliance on external parts, technology, even talent to some extent?
Yeah. So I mean, in context of just politics and so on, or what's
just growing a business? Yeah, in this day and age, because as we get through, as we're growing as an industry, and as you grow as a company, right? The biggest companies are international. Their clients, their supply chains, everything like that. And there's this view that you want to bring everything local and all of that stuff, which, there's advantages and obviously disadvantages too. I'm just curious from your standpoint, as you get to this like C stage and then beyond, how you want to be positioned as a company.
Yeah, yeah. So when it comes to robotics, the hardware part of it is hard, the real world. And so we only operate in North America. We've been invited to a few other countries, mostly EU and Japan. And so far we've been saying no, mostly because you don't want to do just one, or my opinion on it is you don't want to do just one project in Japan, because there's no way you're going to make back the investment of it. You have to have a plan where you're going into this other region, and then you're going to expand. That it's you're landing because you're going to do the expansion and you're building.
So when you say you've been invited, it's like a client has invited you.
Yeah. So
okay, got it.
Prospective customers having incoming calls. And there's a lot of in this space. There's a lot of worldwide interest. That it is a problem everywhere. So expanding globally is definitely going to happen. It's just a matter of getting the timing right, in my opinion, so you don't overreach and then fail.
Yeah. It's very expensive to set up a new facility and whole team and everything like that, especially like you said, with the hardware side of things. If you're going to be importing to a different region, taxes
and supporting operations there, that first customer is going to be the hardest customer that you ever have in that region. So making sure you get it done well. And this goes, and then you can start talking about, I don't know how much you want to dive into this, but you can start talking about partnerships. And I mentioned up front that we really consider ourselves a software company. We're not building the forklifts. We're partnering with people that are good at building forklifts. Right. And so you find a good partner in that region, and that'll help you go down the right path and avoid the pitfalls.
Amazing. Is there anything more that you can share? Because I know we touched on it briefly before, but about your technology, like we started talking about, and you're like, maybe we'll dig into that a little bit more later on, but feel free to just give us as much or as little as you can.
Yeah. Well, I forget the context I said that in, but one of the things that is true in robotics, you can't just solve it with, magic AI fairy dust. The robot itself still has to work really well. And so having a team that can do both the machine learning and all of the stuff that's gotten so popular in AI just recently, but also you need the folks that are, control specialists that can do the low level, make the machine do what it's supposed to do, and be predictable in that sense, so that when you do have an AI that's sitting on top of it, it's not discontinuous in its reactions. And that's you have to have that core before you can expand from that.
Yeah. Are there any exciting updates or projects or announcements coming from the company that you can give us a sneak peek of?
We announced a new, I don't know how many people this would be interesting to, but a double deep reach truck, which is a slightly different morphology than what we're selling now. We're already working with some customers on it. And so we're excited to get that out into the world. It opens a different part of the market to us.
Very cool. Is that the first additional product for you guys outside of the forklift?
It is still a forklift. It's just
it is okay. Just different type.
I can address more of the warehouses out there. So there was single deep and double deep reach trucks, and so we're pretty excited about it.
Are there any other industries or areas that you see as like potential growth for you guys after you obviously do what you do really well? Are there any other areas? Right now we're really focused on warehousing and supply chain.
They use a lot of forklifts in manufacturing too. And so that's a pretty obvious nearby one. And in fact, we're already scouting out some projects to work on in that field. But then you go outdoors, like all of these big machines that work, they don't drive on the roads, they don't go all over the country, but they work in their work cells, in their work environments. Having that set of constraints means that the same basic premise that we have, the shared autonomy, can be applied to it, and you can sort of bootstrap yourself up into a fully learned system. And so I'm excited about that. But again, as a startup, you gotta stay focused. Right. So while I think about that on the weekends, I don't do it during my work hours.
It's good to have the vision in the back of your mind, I guess. Know the direction you're going in. Perfect. Well, Arshan, look, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. really great diving into all of this and having you share. Are there any final thoughts or messages that you'd like to share with our listeners, or any other bits of advice?
This is, hopefully this won't come as blowing smoke, but one of the mistakes I think I made, I should have hired an in-house recruiter right after we did our A round. And I decided, so we had, I mentioned I hired a lot of people out of my networks. During our seed stage, we had no problem hiring. In fact, we had to say no to a lot of people that we wanted to hire because we couldn't afford it. And the thinking when we raised our A round was that, okay, well, it's working. We'll keep doing that. And it did keep working for a few months right after the A round closed. But man, I wish I had had a recruiter, because it lets you do a lot of, when you have a solid recruiter, a good relationship with the recruiter, it lets you do a lot of other things that are otherwise scary. Like, because hiring talent is hard, and the lead time to getting folks in the seats keeps you from taking on projects unless you have a good recruiting structure already done and built. And so when I did raise my B, the very first thing we did was make sure our recruiting function was well supported.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've done that with clients before. There's like certain key hires they want to make, and then I'm like, at this point you should probably hire a head of talent or even a solid senior recruiter, and I've hired them for them so I can step away or just focus on like the key leadership roles. Because like you said, that lead time, and this goes out to like my first time founders or even people that haven't been in a hiring role before, I think there's a disconnect of understanding how long it can take to get someone in seat. And then when you look at your timing throughout the year, for example, I'm talking to some people now where they're like, oh, we want a leader in place by December or January 1. And I'm like, well, you should have started already, because you're not factoring in, like, we've obviously had the summer slowdown, then you've got Thanksgiving and Christmas, everything goes quiet, then it's hard to get people's schedules. No one wants someone to start in December because you're probably off for part of it. Like, thinking about all of that, it's like, okay. And then for maybe evergreen roles in your engineering team or sales team, keeping a pipeline flowing and networking and events and interviews and all of that stuff, it's like, it's a lot of effort.
Yeah. And a strong person in that seat unlocks a whole bunch of other doors.
100%.
It's hard to measure.
Yeah, it really, again, you're preaching to the choir, and I don't want to seem like I'm blowing smoke myself, but no.
That right up front.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Cool. All right. Well, look, thank you for that. And thank you again for your time. Where can people find you, Third Wave Automation, and follow all your progress and updates?
Thirdwave.ai on the web. And if you're looking to buy some automated forklifts, don't hesitate to send us a note.
Awesome. Thanks again, Arshan. It's been great speaking with you.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks very much.